Hello and welcome to the Writing Community Chat Show. Woo! Hello everybody, welcome to the Writing Community Chat Show. Chris and Chris are here for your writing needs, I guess. It's Friday, it's great to make it to the end of the week as always. I hope you're doing well. Let us know in the comments if you are doing well. Hit that like button if you're watching this back and leave us a comment. Please do so. It will help other people find this channel, like-minded people that will join the community. Chris, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. I'm very excited by today's show. We're talking about teaching, which is amazing because obviously we both teach anyway, so that's great. We're talking about books, which again is our second love. And we've got our first ever for this show that we're interviewing somebody live in the wild by a train station. So that is just blows my mind that that's even possible, but it is possible and it's happening and it's exciting.
Live from a platform. What could go wrong? Hopefully. Don't panic. Yeah. Hopefully a few things because it's great. It'd be very entertaining. Not much news this week. Been working hard, hitting the ice baths again. Testament to Chris Hooley, badgering me in all the right ways, helping me with my mental health and motivation. He's done an incredible journey himself, staying sober for nearly a year now. I think it's nearly there. Is that right, Chris?
15th of April will be 1 year without a single drop of alcohol.
That is absolutely incredible. So well done to you, sir. Absolutely fantastic effort. So I've been hitting the ice bath this week. Work has been busy. Been on a course again this week. I'm going away again next week, which is a trauma-informed teaching practice course, which will tie in nicely to tonight's episode. And it's been kind of busy. What about yourself, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, similar to you, obviously, the ice baths. Meditation, that's your next thing, Chris, because that's my new thing that I've been on, meditating every single day. And the question, who am I teaching? Obviously, I teach in a high school, and I often ask myself that question in very different ways. Sometimes it's, who am I teaching in that way? Sometimes it's, who am I teaching today? Different ways of saying that. So yeah, I'm looking forward. Any educational chat is a good chat in my opinion. So I'm looking forward to tonight's guest.
Yes, absolutely. One thing today happened. I'm not sure if anyone's followed this. It's Comic Relief in the UK today. So if you have been donating to that amazing cause, well done. I've been following Jamie Lang, who has been doing an ultra marathon every day for 5 days. And he's not really a runner. It's been absolutely inspiring and incredible to me. So I went out for a couple of runs this week and struggled. And Radio 1 this morning, Greg James show was asking for voice messages. I sent one in and it was featured. So that was kind of cool. Played that to my daughter who loves the show. But yeah, incredible effort from there. So I think maybe 1 year, Chris, we might have to delve into a challenge ourselves. What do you think?
Yeah, I might have to meditate for like a marathon. I don't think I can even attempt one. I think my legs would just break.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's a good idea for either of us. Anyway, let me get tonight's guest on because we're both excited to chat to her, and I'm sure you guys in the chat will have some questions as well. Please do send them in. It's not going to follow its usual format with tonight's show. I think it's going to be a bit of a wonky one in the best kind of way. So let me introduce tonight's guest. Don't laugh, Chris. So tonight we have a truly special guest joining us, someone whose work is making a real difference in the world of education and mental health. Dr. Poppy Gibson is an educator, researcher, and author with a passion for understanding how children learn, develop, and navigate the complexities of modern life. With over a decade of experience teaching in London primary schools, Poppy transitioned into higher education, where she now helps shape the next generation of educators. That's like me and you, Chris. Her research focuses on children's mental health, teacher well-being, and interventions for anxiety and depression, which are crucial topics in today's educational landscape. She's also the author of What Am I Teaching? Displayed lovely above Chris's head. A must-read for any educator looking to understand and support the young minds of their classroom. So we're thrilled to have her tonight to talk about this. So please give a nice warm welcome to the amazing Dr. Poppy Gibson. Hello, Dr. Poppy Gibson.
Hi, Chris and Chris. Can you see me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can also hear you.
Hi, guys. Hi, everyone. What a lovely introduction. Thank you, CJ.
You're welcome. Just so people can kind of understand, you're lingering on a platform right now.
Yes. Well, do you know what they say? You should practice what you preach. And so today has been a mental health day with my friend Amber.
Hello.
But I couldn't miss out on the chance to come and talk to you both. So excited. So please bear with me. I am here, but we are on a train station platform. Such as like, it's a metaphor for life.
Well, I'm, I'm impressed by your sort of courage and bravery to do that on a social platform and conduct an interview with people walking around. How do you feel about that?
It is a Friday night in Chelmsford here, so who knows what could go past. So luckily no one can walk behind me, so you hopefully shouldn't see anything, shady or wonky, to use your word.
Amazing.
After a very busy week, we just needed a bit of a mental health day. We've had good food, lovely coffee, and we even had our feet. We had a little podiatry appointment as well to get our feet seen to, because often in part of the body. So yeah, we're feeling very good. And I'm just very excited to come talk to you about all things teaching and books tonight.
Yeah, incredible. What coffee did you go for out of interest?
Wow, it's kind of a funny story. We actually got free coffee today, which tastes even better than normal coffee. Someone let us down who we were hoping to meet for coffee, so we ended up bumping into people giving away a free coffee ticket for a newly opened restaurant.
Oh, that's a plus and a nice Friday treat. Yeah, so going back to, rewinding the tape for everybody here to where you started your whole teaching career. I'm interested in how you got into that and where that started.
Like teaching at the beginning?
Yeah, going right back to where education became something that you weren't just taking part in, but
weirdly, and this will sound strange, but I know you two might relate as educators yourself. I didn't like school.
yeah.
I liked elements of primary school. I liked creative writing. I liked the DT projects, making cars with rubber bands, which is what it was in my day many moons ago. But as I went up through the education system, I found I became more disconnected from education, I think. In secondary school, I remember one day being called into the head teacher's office, surrounded by what I saw as bad boys. And I was like, oh my goodness, like my path is taking a turn, and I was there for poor behavior. But I knew that education was more than that. It was more than the walls and the discipline. And I knew that I loved learning and I loved reading. I mean, my escape was reading books under my duvet with a torch through childhood. And I loved the library. And it was only as I kind of moved through my teenage years, wondering what to do, I just thought, you know what? And I think when we go into teaching, we go into it for two reasons, right? Either because we loved school or because we want to make a difference and be a change maker that we didn't see when we were at school. And for me, I'm in the second camp. I get a feeling I know which camp you guys are in. And so when it came to choosing my next steps, it was between being a translator. So I did French and Spanish at A-level and English, or being a teacher. And it was just in those final months, I thought, you know what, I think I'm going to give teaching a shot. So at 18, which is just a baby, headed off to uni, did my teacher training, and the rest is history. I've been a teacher ever since.
Wow, that's incredible. I really, all of us put our hands up when you said about not like enjoying school in the right kind of in that way. And I think there's a lot of people that will relate to that and who have become educators and onto many different things related to education. But what I really liked in what you said was, you used to escape with your reading under your duvet. And I really think reading is that escape. And for many people in the education system, even now that we deal with, young people that you deal with say that they don't read or they've never read. And that kind of really, it kind of frustrates me because I want them to be able to go, do you know what? This is an escape for me. And with what's going on in the world right now and everything that they're, struggling with, social media, for example, I know you've written about this. It's a frustrating time for them. And if they were able to get into that escapism, then they could switch off from the rest of the world,
I totally agree. Am I allowed to mention other books that exist?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So I can tell you really interesting, CJ, I totally agree. I've got 3 children myself. And my middle child, my youngest son, never liked reading, and he was a classic gender stereotype we often see in schools of a boy that just picks non-fiction. So often when he was in the school library, he would be picking non-fiction books about space, and again, we often say, don't we, like, reading any book is better than not reading a book. So I used to, of course, love that he was picking books about space, but I wished he would find fiction, and he wasn't quite there. And then it just so happened, my husband took him to the library. It must have been only about a year ago. So he was 9, and I was thinking, he's never going to love reading. And I was so distraught. And then my husband took him to the library, and he found a non-fiction book on ancient Greeks. And he fell in love with it. And that led to finding, you may know, the Rick Riordan series, Percy Jackson. He got one of those from the school library, and that was the stepping stone, because he's very intelligent boy. He's an excellent reader. He just hadn't found the right books. And since then, every birthday, Christmas, any chance he gets a bit of pocket money, he's buying the next books in the series. And he now loves that author. He's reading the Kane Chronicles. He just got a 5 from Father Christmas. And it's amazing. And every night he wants to read for an hour.
Wow.
I go into his room. He goes to bed at 8, and I go in at like 5 to 9. I'm like, time to turn your light off now. But I secretly love it. And he'll go 5 more minutes. I was like, okay. And he's found it, and it's just the best thing in my life. And I totally agree with you. Some children just don't get to find the right book. And the fact that he has is amazing. And I think for any children and young people who haven't found reading yet, it's probably they just haven't quite had the right signpost and the right book. But I agree that now, and just the way, you know, that reading makes him better at everything. The vocabulary he uses day to day, his own writing, his own ideas. But I agree, unfortunately, and we see funding cuts to things like libraries and even school libraries. A lot of children are missing that opportunity.
Yeah. I think it's amazing that sorry, Chris, I interrupted you there. You're going to say something. I know. I could tell.
Yeah. Do you want me to go? Or?
Yeah, go on, mate. Go on.
Yeah. So, Poppy, I'm really intrigued, because obviously you talked a bit about how your student experience inspired you to be a teacher. But what about your teaching experience inspired you to write a book?
Yeah. So I think as a teacher and going through teacher training, so my course was 3 years, but obviously people come to teaching a lot of different ways. I mean, how long was both of your teacher trainings? Can I ask briefly?
Yeah, I did a PGC, so that was a year after my degree.
1 year, but you had to have a degree before that, right, Chris?
Yeah.
So probably that was a 3-year degree and a year. And then CJ, what was yours?
A PGCE, so I didn't have a degree. So
oh, spicy. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so but you can see, as you've both done PGCE, you're having to learn how to support so many diverse needs, teach so many subjects, unless you're trained in one subject. But still, that's a lot in 1 year. It's very intensive year. I know from my friends and students that have been through it, although mine was 3, I didn't have that intensity. Even in 3 years, I did not learn everything I needed to go to the talk phase. And so I think what I found as I came out of my teacher training was there are definitely some things I haven't learned how to do yet. And for me, loving books, it was a no-brainer. Why don't we try and write some of them down? And I think we can always all learn, right? We can always keep learning and be lifelong learners. So it was like the next step for me, really.
I love that. I think it's one of those things that if you find a space and a niche and you've got your voice, obviously anyone can add to the pot, and it's just adding to the collective wealth, which is great. But how did you know what your voice was going to be in the field of teaching? What stood out to you as areas that you wanted to tackle and address? If you could talk now that the time is short.
Of course. And can I also say that, Chris, you're the first person who's made me think how we ask the question of who am I teaching, which is my latest book. No one's actually made me think of that before. I guess it would be, who am I teaching? That's my latest book. But my other books have all been about, I think, trying to see the child behind, the child inside. And I think so often in teaching, we're so short on time. We're trying to think, what learning objective have they met and which groups can we put them in? But just forgetting that for every behaviour, is an unmet need, and trying to see, actually, if you try and think what those needs are, you'll then have better behavior. The children will engage more and enjoy more. It makes your job so much easier. But I think as teachers, we don't always have the time. So for me, it was really thinking, actually, I've been taught how to teach. So I knew like a lot of pedagogical tools. I knew what to teach, but actually I didn't know, who am I teaching? And another place it came from. So I was a primary school teacher, as you said, CJ, for 11 years. But so many times in that journey, I was coming across situations I hadn't been taught how to handle. Like once I had a mum saying, my daughter's adopted. I thought, wait a minute, they never have taught me how to support a child that's adopted. Or I'd have a child whose granddad died. Oh my goodness, they never taught me on teacher training how to support a bereaved child. And I was really pleased, CJ, to hear you're doing your trauma-informed practice. And this has kind of come full circle for me, because now one of my children is adopted. And I'm seeing the same thing repeated in their school and I love their teachers, don't get me wrong, I love their school. But there've been moments where they phoned me and said, oh, just to let you know, your child ate a glue stick. And I say, well, they're probably overstimulated and trying to regulate. Or your child stole something from the classroom. Well, actually, when we look at children with trauma, children that have been in the care system, children that are adopted, thieving and stealing can be one way they're trying to find control when they're feeling powerless. And so I've kind of had some further conversations with their teacher, but actually it is part of a bigger problem when we're not finding time to show teachers how to deal with the people behind the numbers on their register. So all of my books really have been around children wellbeing. If you strip it back, wellbeing's at the heart of it. And it's just really about having the human approach, I think. And if I'm really transparent, the reason I made a move from primary school to now working at university is I couldn't work where sometimes we're forgetting the human element of teaching. And I've worked in schools where they've done really well to nurture, but I've worked in schools, again, not naming which school, but I remember going to the head and saying, I'd love to do a little intervention for these children at lunchtime. And the teacher asked me, where are they on the Venn diagram of being secure with their objectives, you know, for the national league tables? And I said, oh, no, they're special educational needs. They're not going to meet the objectives. And I was pretty much told, don't waste your time with those children, because we're trying to get as many children secure as possible. And it all came down to data crunching. And actually, I left that school after a term because I thought, that's not what teaching is. That's not why we go into teaching. So I think all of my books have been about reminding us the human element. But one more thing, most of my books, I can't actually think of a single book where I wrote every single word, because another thing that I love to do is get other people to share their voice within them. And I've even gone to like my own university students, because a lot of them are TAs in a school, teaching assistants. And I've said, your voice is valuable. And they're like, no, I can't write a book. I'm like, no, but look, I've got a book contract. Write a bit, like get your name in it, because you're valuable. And I think that's another thing I've seen. Teachers don't realise their value, and particularly support staff. So through all of my books, even if it's only a couple of sentences or a 500-word extract, I've wanted to enable other people to share their voice. And I think that's something we can really do well through educational books.
Yeah, I think it's incredible what you mentioned earlier, where, you know, someone's going through difficult or traumatic times, maybe outside of the school. And then when they come into the classroom and you have teachers that are not prepared to understand or maybe teach in that way, that those children are expected to go and sit there and go through the motions like everyone else, despite all that's going on in their minds, you know, and without that sort of acknowledgement or training for the teacher, that child is not going to be able to engage and learn anything or want to be there, perhaps, you know. So I think it's a real sort of element that can be addressed, and perhaps quite an easy fix in reality, that can make a huge difference to that child there.
You're definitely right, honestly. And I think it's just changing your mindset. So for example, thinking a child who's been through trauma probably wants to be near a door to feel exit. And a child who has trauma may like to be able to see the clock, so they feel in control of time. So little things like that. And again, all children are different. But if you go in trying to think about what they might need, particularly for children that can't communicate their needs. They might be non-verbal, or they might be very young, or they might not even know what they need. If you've just got that extra level of care in your classroom, and now I'm obviously teaching adults, so I can kind of think, you know, maybe they're lately diagnosed as neurodivergent and they're feeling quite vulnerable. Maybe they themselves were in the care system or have past trauma that they're carrying. Actually, I can look at them with a kind of renewed care for them. I think it applies to any age.
Yeah.
Poppy, I was going to ask you a question about how does let's say somebody's in a position where they're watching this now and they've got results-based culture on one side. They're very much in a school that's driven by results. They've got a mental health crisis in young people, and they've also got a lack of resources and support in terms of cost, because we know that was stripped out of most schools in quite a big way. What would your advice be to them, and how could they navigate that experience?
My first advice would be, I hope you're taking care of yourself because you're managing a lot. You're a teacher. So number one, where is your self-care? I think the best thing is to just be communicating with others. I think so often in schools, particularly where resources are taken away, we then feel that we've lost something. But the best thing we can do is be sharing knowledge, sharing resources, working together. And I think that in terms of just like actual practical ideas rather than physical resources as well, it's about communicating with each other to see what works well. We don't always need a lot of money. I think the problem in schools is we have been learnt to connect money with success, and to put money into a £7,000 scheme to get success. But actually, we're all human and we all know how to nurture and care, or we can learn how to, even if we haven't been nurtured and cared for ourselves. So I think if we hold that like at the heart of our practice, it makes other things a lot easier. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And how would you give someone advice to take care of themselves? Obviously, teaching is notorious as a profession where teachers work all hours, not just in the building, obviously outside of the building as well, to make sure that they're prepared for their students and everything. So what advice would you give to them, and how can they recognize if they're reaching a tipping point?
Yeah, such a good question, Chris. And one thing that we use a lot at university level, and I'm sure you'll know it, I'm sure listeners, you'll know it, is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We all know that pyramid, don't we? The pyramid, and it's about how at the very top is self-actualization. And that's where we know ourselves and we know our goals and we're living our best version of ourselves. But at the very bottom is our basic need. And what I do, even with my students, is look at the basic needs and think, what are our basic needs? Warmth, food, safety. If you're missing those out, if you're going through your day not drinking enough, and I've met teachers, I'm sure you have, where they say, I don't drink water at school because I know I won't have time to go to the bathroom. I'm like, oh my goodness, you are not meeting, don't put your hand up to that. You're not meeting the base of that pyramid. There's no way you can climb higher. And it's the same at any age. And I think about it with my children. You know, they say, I'm hungry. So do you know what? You need to feed them right now. Or I'm thirsty. And how often as teachers do we let our bellies rumble? And like, oh, sorry, it's my belly. Like, why are you not meeting your need of food? So little simple top tips, having little cartons of juice in your teacher drawer, protein bars in your teacher drawer. Because if you're not meeting those basic needs, and it sounds so basic, but I went through years where I was not eating and drinking properly at school. I'll get home, binge eat, live on takeaways because I was too tired, and it's not sustainable. And there was one time when I was burnt out, just crying in a car park. I was like, this isn't sustainable. Why do we put ourselves through it? Because teaching it, you're giving so much. You need to give back to yourself, and it really comes down to those basic needs. So I would say, even your phone screensaver, have Maslow's hierarchy, or print it out on your desk and remind yourself, have I met my basic needs? Because if not, you're not going to be able to do all the other things. So really, I would say, are you taking breaks? Are you eating? Are you drinking enough? That's really all you need to do, and then you'll feel well enough to do other things. But my other top tip would be, have a passion. It just happens for me that it's studying and reading. And a lot of teachers I meet say, oh, I've got a great idea for a book. So my tip would be, as self-care, have a project for you outside of teaching, because you know how consuming it is to be a teacher. You teach all day, you go home, you're thinking about marking books or you're planning. But if you've got another little project for you that you can enjoy, whether it's studying a course or writing a book, I mean, that's just me. We all have different interests. Going to the gym, make time for it and do not compromise, because that's where we start to burn out, when we compromise on our values. So it's about having strict boundaries around our enjoyment and not being willing to compromise on that. And it can be harsh. It means saying no to other things you might want to do. But self-care really comes from serving yourself first.
On that, Poppy, obviously you've talked yourself about having 3 children and being a busy teacher. And I know this is a problem for a lot of teachers. They get home and then they have the family, which we know can be a full-time job in itself. So then where are you getting that space for you, and how can you fit that in?
So I'll be honest, when I said don't compromise, I don't compromise on my children's bedtimes. And I know everyone's different. Again, our children are different. But for me, my daughter goes down at 7, my boys go down at 8, and they can read in bed, obviously. But then I have my evening. And then at the weekend, we all get to, sometimes we'll put all a movie in a hat and we pick. And my evenings, again, my daytimes are fully child focused, and then my evenings are for me. So I think it's, again, having boundaries around your time, which I know is hard. I've got 3 kids and I know it. But if you communicate with your kids, you'll say, you know, let's have an amazing day together. And you say, oh, mommy just needs a break now. Or here, I've set up some arts for you. Mommy just needs to have half an hour with a coffee now. Just communicate with your children, and you're actually role modeling when you need the break as well. It's not selfish to say to your children, because, you know, we give them everything, don't we? And when they're around you, you want to answer every question. But I will make times in the weekend where I'll set something up, and I'll say, Mommy's going to sit with a coffee and read her book or read her magazine, like next to you. But you can have fun doing this. So I think it's role modeling that you are taking care of you, because that's going to hopefully lead them to grow up and know they need to take care of themselves. And I think another thing is also not being afraid to tell them when you're tired, because often as teachers, we put on a performance. I think as parents, we often do the same. So don't be afraid to say, Mommy is really tired right now. Like, do you want to paint my toenails so I can sit here and relax? So things your children do with you where you don't need to be at full energy and still enjoy being together actually helps you take care of you and role model that self-care.
Yeah, that's a great question and a great answer. I like I've seen around somewhere where they say pretend to be or try and go to sleep and tell your kids to wake you up when you want to start tidying around, because they won't wake you up.
I love that. And I think there's an episode of Bluey where he's pretending to be a patient in a hospital that's asleep on the sofa. So yeah, anything like that, DJ, I love that.
Bluey is genius. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, we love it too.
Yeah, it's so good. Interestingly, Anya put in the comments that many states in America where she's from have banned books in the schools if the books deal with mature issues, calls for diversity, or LGBTQ themes. What do you think about that? I think that's from a UK perspective, I think that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, thank you, Anya, for that thoughtful comment. Censorship is never going to be easy. Yeah, it's a really tricky one, isn't it? It feels like a step backwards when we see books banned, doesn't it? I think the best you can do really is pull together as a school community, because although you might not be able to have those books, no one yet can stop us having conversations. So I think my advice would be, okay, maybe you can't have LGBTQ plus books in your library, but it doesn't mean you can't talk about different families and blended families and different relationships in an age appropriate way. So although, you know, yet they can take away our books, they can't take away our voices.
Poppy, what trends are you sort of seeing from the next generation of teachers in terms of like fears and anxieties, and what are you seeing from the students?
Yeah, it's a good question, Chris. And one thing which we're seeing growing is climate anxiety. I'm sure you all know, you see this coming up, but I think, sorry, just a train going past. So obviously I am seeing more of my adult students with anxiety, and I'm sure in the classroom as well. Oh, thank you, Anya, for your response. I think that, sorry, it just ruined my train of thought. What was the question?
Was that a
I
post?
just said, what trends are you seeing with adult teachers in terms of fears and anxieties, and what are you seeing in the students as well?
Yeah, so I was talking about climate awareness, wasn't I, and climate anxiety. So this is something we need to get better at talking about, sustainability, and we see it done in schools, but sometimes almost that greenwashing, isn't it, of let's have a recycle bin in the classroom, you know, and you see at the end of the day it's all gone in the same bin bag. I think it's about bringing some of these difficult conversations into the classroom. But again, it's not always easy if you as a teacher haven't been taught how to have those conversations. So a lot of things we've seen coming up, issues around anxiety, mental health, suicidal ideation with young people, death, grief. When we've seen obviously the pandemic, we had a lot of talk about death and illness, which we weren't always prepared for. And I think, again, books can be amazing if, Anya, we can have them. And I had the pleasure of writing, so my latest book is called All the Things They Never Told You About Teaching. And I had the pleasure of co-authoring this with amazing head teacher of Inclusion College. She's just moved into another role, but she's been a head teacher at a special needs college for a long time, Marie Greenhalgh. And we wrote a book that kind of explored what were all these different ones. I'm trying to think what else was in there. We looked at grooming, abuse, sexual abuse. Again, hearing some of these makes some people already nervous, but by not talking about them doesn't mean they don't exist, and doesn't mean children and young people won't experience them. But certainly sustainability and climate anxiety has been a big one, and I think, again, it's just about trying to facilitate, because we don't always want to lead, do we, but trying to facilitate those sensitive conversations, such as around climate awareness, so that we can just explore how people feel. If we don't open the space for it, it's really difficult. I'll give you another example. I wrote a book on death for children last year. It's a children's book, with my illustrator Alfred Russo. Now, with all my other books, I'm quite lucky that I found publishers, or was even approached by publishers to write for them. Amazing. And then we wrote this book about death, and like no one would touch it with a barge pole. And we've all been there as well, where we're like, we've got this great book. Why has no one won it? And so we wrote this children's book. And I was like, why does no one want a children's book about death? And it's kind of baffling, isn't it? Because those children will die one day. We will die. Again, that sounds really blunt, but isn't it true? Am I going to tell my children one day I'm going to float on a cloud in the sky, or I'm going to live forever? You know, they'll say to me, "Mom, like, will you always be here?" And I can say, "Yeah, I'll be here forever and ever. I'm never going to die." It's not true. Well, it might be true. I don't know. I haven't tested it yet. But if we avoid these because we're uncomfortable, I think we're doing children a disservice. We actually decided to self-publish that book, and I love that we live in a place where we can self-publish. I think it's amazing. We live in an age we can do that, and that has enabled us to have teachers using this book, because you guys know, I mean, you know from your podcast and everything you do, that books are the perfect way, not just to escape, as you said, CJ, but to open up that conversation. And one thing I learned in my adoption training when I was going through the adoption process here in England, they said, once your child comes home, don't always talk to them face to face. I'm sure you've heard this with your trauma-informed practice. Quite often the best conversations are had when you're sitting side by side in the car, or if you take a walk and you're walking side by side, because there's no eye contact. And that's where reading a book with someone is key, because you're not face to face, it's not confrontational. But our book is looking at what happens after we die. There's children asking questions like, what happens to our body after we die? And then there's a response that I formulated. And even if people don't agree with the ideas in the book, it still opens a space for you to share, well, what is your idea? So in the book, I say, what happens after we die? Well, your body will start to decay, right? Your heart will stop beating, and your lungs will stop breathing and your body will start to decay. Again, some people probably getting squeamish. It's written better in the book. But what I've seen, and I've read the book with my 2 older children. I don't think my younger child's quite ready for it yet. But with my oldest children, my oldest child's a teenager, it was really cool to make space to talk about death. And then he said to me, he's 13, he said, do you know what, Mom? I think, because it says, you know, what happens after we die? And he said, I think I want to be buried in a tree pod. Have you seen those where you put it in a big pod and the tree grows? And I said, that is so weird. That's what I want after I die. And I'd never said it to him. And how many of us know what our children want to happen to their body? And again, this sounds really morbid, but I kind of feel empowered that if something was to happen to him, God forbid, and I hope it never ever does, that I would know that bit of information. And again, this already might be cognitive overload for someone to hear me talking with my child about death, but everyone's going to die. And so I think when we can make space for these conversations, it's really powerful.
So it is very interesting. Have you had many reactions from that book in terms of like reviews?
Yeah, and so the people that have used it, and again, we produced it not to like make millions. I mean, none of us are in publishing for millions, right? And I didn't even do it to sell a lot of copies. What we wanted was for the copies that were read to have a purpose, and it's been really cool. I've had someone where their little boy lost a granddad. They were reading the book, and it, again, because of the way it's written with like questions, it gave him space to talk about it, and it also gave space for the parent to talk about it as an adult. And I also shared it with an adult who just lost their mum, and the adult said it really helped me reframe my grief, because I hadn't really started to question what I think about death and grief, and it gave me a frame. So I think that's the amazing thing about books, isn't it? Sometimes it helps us order our thinking. So the feedback we've had has been really lovely. And so I'd say for anyone who's got a spicy idea for a book, go for it, because you never know who might read it, and it might just be just what they needed to read right then. Sometimes I think we shy away from anything that's, you know, not mainstream. But don't be afraid to have a go and write it, even just write it down just for yourself. It's been really cool to hear that it's given people a bit of a space, particularly when they found people around them didn't want to open up the conversation. And I remember my dad died when I was 22, and I was a primary school teacher, obviously, and I remember going back into the staff room like the week or so after he died, and no one said you know, how did he die, or what was it like when he died? No one wanted to ask those scary questions. You know, just like, oh, how are you? Oh, yeah, I'm great. You know, what am I going to say? Feel awful. Like, my dad died in the night, and I saw the undertaker come. Like, you know, but no one wants to know that. Some of us aren't quite ready for that. But if you can find a book that can help you have a little space, even just to reflect to yourself, even if you read it on your own, I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think it is something that we shy away from so badly. I'm interested to think.
I wrote a whole book about it.
Yeah, I'm interested to know if you could change anything in the education system overnight, like a magic trick, what would you change?
Can I say everything?
Well, you could.
I tell you, I wouldn't change our teachers. I wouldn't change our teaching assistants, our HLTAs, our LSAs. They're all amazing. Honestly, I would just rip out the curriculum across all our 4 nations here in the UK. England, I would say, is the weakest out of all our 4 curriculums. We do a lot of work at my uni looking across the 4 nations. So I work for the Open University, which you may know is very cool because it's online. So because we have students from all over the UK and beyond, we have to look at all the different curriculums, not just England. And whereas in Wales, we see them talking about wellbeing, and in Scotland, we see them talk about wellbeing, in England, it's still so minor. So my main thing would be, let's rip out the curriculum and let's have something back in that's more holistic, and it's not worrying about English and maths. I don't know if either of you know that Rose curriculum that was going to come out in 2010.
No.
that one, or if any listeners, and I love that it's called the Rose Curriculum, which sounds beautiful, but it's not to do with the flat, it's to do with Sir Jim Rose, who any teachers listening might know Sir Jim Rose, obviously, who's amazing educator and leader. And he did an investigation into schools with head teachers about what was going on in schools in 2009. He wrote something called the Rose Report. Sorry, you're not here for a history lesson. But what happened, and this is really interesting for primary school teachers, right? Because Sir Jim Rose and his team came up with a new curriculum called the Rose Curriculum. And it was due to be published in 2010. And it was so beautiful. It's been mostly redacted off the internet, but if you Google it, you might find the Rose Curriculum and a bit about it. And you'll find the Rose Report. And what this curriculum would have looked like for England, it had 6 areas of learning instead of all the subjects, with the core ones and the other ones. It was 6 areas. And one of them, how cool is this, was physical and mental health. Mm. And what was really cool was all the 6 were equal size. And one of them was about language and computing. And one of them was about physical and mental health. And it baffles me that when we ask what are our main subjects in England in the primary school, it's English and maths. And we even drop science from being a main one, really, because we took away the SATs. And I understand English and maths, of course I do. But it baffles me why our core subject isn't something like being human or relationships or mental health or well-being. And it's because we're dealing with a really antiquated curriculum, aren't we? It's basically the same one that Margaret Thatcher brought in 1989. Yeah. Again, you're not here for a history lesson, but those of us that have been teaching a long time, no, we're pretty much just repackaging the same stuff over and over. And I think that's where you see good teachers are the ones that read between the lines of the curriculum. And they don't just deliver the curriculum, but they deliver it with care and they make space for those conversations around it and outside of it.
It's really interesting. Oh, sorry, Chris.
No, I was going to say, sorry, I'll let you carry on if you want, but
I was just going to mention that it is really interesting you talk about the mental health, if that was something in school, the difference it would make. And here in Wales, in the news this week, they've literally been talking, or the government's been talking about the crisis of mental health they're dealing with the adults. So, for example, if that was something that was brought in as children in the 90s, a lot of the issues they're dealing with and the financial aid they're having to put towards these issues might have been evaded in some way.
Exactly. And you know why it didn't come in? So I often act it out for my students, actually. I tell them it was like, do you know that film Terminator with Arnold Schwarzenegger? I tell them that basically they created thousands of Rose curriculum. This is my own artistic license. And they printed all the curriculums and they're about to ship them off over England and make a difference to children, right? Like you say. But then they get a phone call and they're like, hello? And it's number 10 Downing Street. And they say, wait, don't send them out. We've got a change in political lead. And so they ended up, and this is what I imagine happened, but I'm not sure. They throw them into lava pits and then you just see like the last Rose curriculum, like Terminator's hand, like the last page, just like flapping. And that was like all the dreams of children having well-being and mental health like, on the curriculum. And I don't know if that's actually what happened, but what happened was we obviously had the coalition in 2010, and that put a halt to this being rolled out, even though it was ready to go. And then we ended up just in England 4 years later having a revised national curriculum that was basically the same.
Poppy, that does tie in actually to what I was going to ask. I was going to say, do you think it's more of a catch-22 in terms of you've got all these great ideas and to implement a new curriculum is the ideal. However, you've still got the day-to-day where you've got to carry on teaching. So therefore, there's not the time to dedicate that much manpower to creating this new holistic educational wonder. And therefore, you can never change it. So it's just this repeated cycle of we're going to change a little bit and improve it a little bit, but then we still have to teach children that are in front of us, so we've not got that much time to dedicate it. And do you think that's just a vicious cycle?
Yeah, you're spot on, 100%. And then the problem is we're seeing teachers going into teacher training. Again, if you break down a lot of teacher training programs, obviously all are different, and some do prioritize student well-being, but a lot of them are just, most of it is about how to teach maths and how to teach English. So we are replicating the same issues, aren't we? Sorry, I missed the first part of your question because a freight train went past.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, found it really amusing, the fact that it could see the train going past in the background in the reflection, and your hair was flying to the side. It was hilarious. Again, like we
Sorry
said, there'd
about
be some wonky viewing in this show, and it's all for the good.
Yeah, I just styled it out.
Yeah.
So probably when it comes to writing Who Am I Teaching, and you sit down and you think, I've got this great idea for a book, how do you decide who you leave in and who you leave out of the instruction manual of Who Am I Teaching, if that makes sense? Because as you've said, we're so complex, there's so many varieties of problems and needs, and so where do you even begin?
Such a good question. Yeah, how even in one book we could not fit it all, right? So I think that's the cool thing when you pitch a book. And again, for anyone listening who hasn't done it yet, do it, like pitch it. This was quite a cool one. I actually got approached from my editor, Amy Thornton at Sage. She actually contacted me. I think she followed me on socials for a while. She was like, I've got to ask, are you interested in writing a book? And I was like, yes. And all she had was this idea that we need to look more at who the children are in our class. And we came up with this idea of Who Am I Teaching? But it was certainly difficult. She said, go away and think, what chapters would you have? So I guess for me, it came from my lived experience as a teacher, thinking, where have I felt like that I've needed extra support or extra conversations, or, I haven't quite felt skilled enough. And those were the ones that I wanted to capture. So it was hard to write the SEND chapter because there was not enough space. So just trying to think, what was some of the most frequent diagnosis that I was seeing in the classroom, and things like that. And from my own experience, obviously thinking about children from care experience background. And I think no book can ever do everything, but if you can just at least start the conversations. So it kind of involved me writing a list of chapters, sending it to my editor, and I think she added an extra one. She added children who are non-verbal, again, which I hadn't had much experience of and hadn't thought of. So we added that in, and then luckily one of my colleagues at the Open University, Mel Green, she has 2 children. One is non-verbal, so she then used her lived experience to write in that chapter. So you can see how, where none of us can be an expert in everything, where possible, I love to share those voices of the experts. But yeah, it's hard, but I hope for any teacher training that they would consider reading that book, because it just helps you think of some things that might not have been covered in your teacher training program.
What would be the one takeaway then from this book that you'd want people to know to entice them into it?
Yeah, I would say maybe just think about when you were a child in the classroom, or even if you were homeschooled, were you really seen? And actually, if you weren't really seen, what difference would it have made? And I think for many people, they may not have been fully seen. And even now, my adult students, I feel, are not always fully seen. Obviously, this week was Neurodiversity Week, Neurodiversity Celebration Week. And I think I'm seeing so many people. I actually did a little piece with the OU on it. So many people being diagnosed as neurodivergent. Most women are in their 30s and 40s. And so you think, for these people, like, did you know, for example, the average age of a male being diagnosed with ADHD is 7, but the average age for females is late 30s.
Yeah,
you can see a discrepancy there. And so just thinking, for those women, or for anyone of any gender who's been through life and not been seen, that's really tough. So I guess if you really want to see who's in your classroom, this book's still not going to help you. We are so complex as humans, aren't we? But it's just going to give you a little extra pair of glasses, to have a little bit of a closer look at who's really in your classroom. And a lot of the things in there, although it's aimed at a primary audience, so 4 to 11, a lot of these things don't end once you go to secondary. If you're neurodivergent, you're neurodivergent for life. So understanding some of those behaviours and some of the strategies for success are lifelong.
It's a massive hurdle for women who getting diagnosed late. And I was speaking to someone recently who was diagnosed quite late in their life, and they'd spent their life being either called too excitable or too reserved, and always feeling like they're battling their personality or not knowing where it should sit. And then suddenly getting that diagnosis, it kind of makes sense. But that's so much of their life where they're unsure of who they should be. It's such a crazy journey for them, and it must be so frustrating.
Exactly. Yeah, you're 100% right. And I'm just glad that your friend is now hopefully understanding a bit better about how to move forward. So that's the good news. It's never too late. It's never too late to get a diagnosis and, to try and know yourself a bit better. It doesn't change who you are, but it can change how you can support yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
Poppy, can we expect a who am I working with and who am I leading?
And who am I married to?
No, I'm being serious about those two questions, though, because who am I leading, obviously, for head teachers and things that you said before, in terms of looking at the individual, looking at the teams in which they manage, I think is really important. But also, who am I working with? You talked about working together and that communication and sharing resources. And I don't necessarily think that's something that happens in all schools. However, it happens in all good schools. So again, I think there could be a market for that. And if you've already got the idea of who am I teaching, I'm being deadly serious about those two.
Okay, I'll tell you what. Let's talk after the show. Email me and we can pitch it to my editor next week and we'll co-write it. We'll co-write both of them.
Absolutely.
We'll pitch it to Amy next week, all right? Email me.
We'll do that. Certainly will.
You know what, in life you have to ask. Like, the answer can only be no, right? Amy, if you're watching this, I'll be emailing you soon. Me and Chris have got an idea.
If you've got any questions for Poppy, please send them in. Chris, are we doing our regular questions with Poppy?
I'm slightly apprehensive because obviously if Poppy's train turns up at 9, I think that's going to be a great image of her getting on the train and ending the show.
Yeah.
Ask those questions.
We'll expect it.
That'd be very cool, wouldn't it? The door closing. My train's not till after 9 o'clock, though, unfortunately. That would be fun.
We've got a few minutes to get our staple questions in then. So one of the first ones is, if you could take any character from fiction, and I'm going to say teach that character for the day or learn with that character for the day, which character would you choose and why?
Okay, I know 100%. This is hard because this wasn't the question you sent me, but I know who it's going to be. The Grinch.
Wow.
Because, man, he wasn't seen at all. And I don't know if you've seen the Jim Carrey version. I'm sure we all know and love Jim Carrey. But if you've seen that version of the Grinch film, he is not understood at all. And it breaks my heart so much. So do you know what? I would just want to sit with him when he's young, right? Because it is an adoption story after all. A lot of people don't realise the Grinch was dealing with, and if you've seen the Jim Carrey version, he's brought in on the wind by the wrong stork to Whoville. That wasn't meant to be his community. So it's already hard for him. He's in a community where he doesn't speak the language. It's not his culture because they've got a Christmas culture. And I would just want to be like, I see you, little Grinch, and like, tell me what's going on, man. Like, let's make some space for you and not think that you're bad and wrong because you don't like Christmas. Like, there's other stuff going on here. There's attachment issues. There's communication issues. And then he had to live on his own on Mount Crumpet. And so then you've got isolation and so 100%. You can tell that I love the Grinch. That's my answer.
It's a great answer. Love that.
I didn't think I'd be talking about the Grinch on your radio show, but here we are.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, if you could take the ending from anything, whether that be a TV show, a book, whatever that might be, and change the ending, what ending are you going to change and why?
Oh, that's a really difficult one. I mean, you made it too broad for me. It could be anything. It could be anything. I'll tell you now. Many of you might have seen the film Fight Club. But this film always stays with me. And my teenage son keeps saying, when can I watch it? Because his friend's seen it. I'm like, you're not watching that till you're 18, my friend. Because it's a big film. But that is one film that I think is so beautifully done. Although I love books, I would choose books every time. There's something about that movie that stays with me. It's so haunting. And I think at the end, when you kind of know there's no happy way out, I would just love it if he and Helena Bonham Carter just like, I don't know, they have a wedding in Hawaii and they open a little bar on the beach. I would just like to see like good things for people. So I think the ending of Fight Club could have had, Fight Club goes to Hawaii twist. A bit of happiness. Like we need more joy in our life.
Yeah, brilliant.
I'm going to bring the tone down now, Poppy, but it's quite topical, so it might help boost ratings. But have you seen Adolescence?
Yes, I've seen 2 episodes.
Right. So obviously,
I've not yet, so no spoilers.
That
no spoilers.
TV show is a manifestation of what's happening in a culture.
Yeah.
Watching it is great. Seeing the problem is great. But then how do we deal with a problem of that magnitude?
Yeah. I mean, again, this is too big with the last few minutes of your show.
Yeah.
I think it's really good. This is a sign where a show can really bring awareness to something, right? And I was talking to someone about it, and they said they didn't even know what an incel was. And as a woman, I can tell you, I know what incels are, and I've known for a long time. The person that said that to me was a man. And so I think it's really brought about that gender disparity in society. So I think it's good. It's raised awareness. How we tackle it, I think it's kind of shown. So I don't want to do any spoilers, but there's one bit in it where they talk about social media. Again, no spoil. This isn't a spoiler, CJ. And you realise that someone did not understand how young people communicate on social media, right? And this was a really smart person that hadn't even realised. And it makes you see young people and children communicate in a different way than we sometimes realize. So what we need to be doing is understanding, who am I teaching? We need to know, like, what are their practices, what are their cultures, not trying to be friends with them, but trying to understand and see what's going on. Because as you'll see when you do watch it, CJ, and make sure you do,
I will.
part of the problem was they didn't know how children were communicating. So I think it's raised awareness. There's a lot more work to do on that, and we don't want to mention all the big celebrity culture of incel culture, but hopefully, and I've seen now a lot of teachers starting to think, how can we deal with toxic masculinity in school? How do we even talk about that? That's one of the chapters in our All I Told You About Teaching book. And again, a lot of people are like, why are you writing about that in a book? And we're 2 women who've grown up in what I would say quite a patriarchal society, so we've seen why we talk about it. But yeah, it is a harrowing watch. I would say for anyone who's not watched it, do watch it. It really makes you think, doesn't it, Chris? It really makes you think, and why we do need to break down these barriers between adults and young people, because we think we know our children. And again, this isn't a spoiler, CJ, but you see how one of the parents didn't always make time for their children, and you prioritized work. And you kind of think, do you know what? You've got it the wrong way around. If you're prioritizing work over your kids, over your family, over yourself, you need to reassess that balance. So yeah, a lot of
final question then. We've got a couple of minutes left. You're on your deathbed, you're looking back at your writing career. What would you be happy with? What is success to you?
I think if I can think that even one book I wrote help someone look at something a little bit differently, or help someone that they might not have thought how to help, that I'm good with that. What, even one little ripple, yeah, that's good.
Yeah, brilliant. It's a great answer. I always love those answers, because a lot of the time it's almost already achieved. I think you probably already have done that, and I think that's fantastic. And the work you've done, I think, over the years is fantastic. So
that's really
just keep doing what you're doing.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you.
You're welcome. Right. Where can people find Who Am I Teaching? More about yourself. Where can they follow you and stalk you? All that good stuff.
Yeah. Oh, it's just a little train coming in. So you can find me on any social media platform, apart from TikTok, because I have a very addictive personality and I just cannot go down that rabbit hole. My best friend's obsessed and I can't. But you'll find me on Instagram, Dr. Poppy Gibson. You'll find me on Twitter, Poppy Gibson UK, LinkedIn. Really happy for anyone to reach out. If you've got an interesting idea for a book and you're worried about how you pitch it, please get in touch with me. I've pitched those difficult proposals. But yeah, please do get in touch with me. 100%. Always happy to hear from people, particularly if you've got that one big idea for a book and you're not quite sure how to push it forward. Really happy for you to contact me. And Chris, please do email me about our co-authoring.
Can that be like a 3 co-author thing or not?
Yes, the more
Yes.
the merrier. The
I
more
want
the
to jump on that bandwagon.
Yes, okay. I want to hear from both of you soon.
Brilliant. Poppy, thank you so much. You've been a fantastic guest. Our
Thank
first live in the wild guest, I guess. But honestly, thank you so much. You've been spreading so much knowledge and inspiration for teachers out there, and you know this is going to go down well. So thank you, and we hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you, and just thanks for having me on over the train. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and love your show, love your work, and hopefully speak to you both again soon when we write our books together. So
amazing. Anything from you, Chris?
No, just I hope your arm recovers, because I've done that before in the past, and holding your phone for an hour is difficult. So, well
I'll need a nice cup of tea after this.
Ooh, yeah, lovely.
Much deserved. Well, thank you. Brilliant.
Have a great weekend, everybody. Look after yourselves, and we'll see you very soon. Thank you, guys. Bye. Oh, where's the video? Hang on. Keep waving. Keep waving.